What's up, Wargamers? Welcome back to World of Wargaming. I'm Isaiah, and today again I invite you to sit down, grab a snack, maybe something to drink, and let me talk at you for a minute. And the thing that I'd like to talk at you about today is this game. I hope you can see it. Lights. Don't Look Back, from Black Site Studios, written by Matt Burns. First impressions on this book: I love the compact and concise nature of it. As the first time I opened this and flipped through it, I was like, oh man, this is nothing but meat and potatoes. And if you could look at me, you could see that I'm obviously an individual who is in support of meat and potatoes. There are not a lot of pieces of art in the book, but the art that is here is very grimy and dirty and dark. And it really does set a bit of a mood for the game, which the game is a kind of in the 90s, early 2000s is what always comes to my mind when I play it, slasher game. You play a cast of survivors, and your goal is to accomplish some goal without getting murder-rated by the killer. But returning to my original point, is that the art is, there's not a whole lot of art in here. The art that's in here is very fitting to the mood and the setting. And there are also a few kind of scenic shots of models, which are just absolutely gorgeous. This is my favorite kind of thing to see in rule books, probably, because beautiful pieces of art are awesome and they appeal to me, and I like them and they do set a mood, but photographs like this provide more inspiration for the tabletop. And with a solo game especially, unless you're me or someone else, unless you make content, when you play a solo game, you're playing for yourself. And so the more immersed you can get yourself into that experience, especially if you're playing alone or with a small group of friends, the better that experience becomes. And inspiration for that is always welcome. So getting into that meat and potatoes that I referred to earlier, this book is very, very, very thin. It is 28 pages long. It's a little bit bigger than my favorite size format, but I'm glad this is way better than, if it were like a full, 8.5 by 11 or 12 or 9 by 12 or whatever that it could be. And it jumps pretty squarely straight into action, starting with your, game terminology, things like that. One thing it does have that I think is interesting is it has the same scatter mechanic as Lunar. The widget that the starter set comes with, which is what I bought, is actually the exact same shape as the one from Lunar. It's just it's more like a cleaver, and it's got blood splatter on it, and it's a really cool widget. You'll see it in the battle reports when we get to the playthroughs. And this has got, what you need. You need a D20, a D10, and to be able to do a D5, which is to roll a 10, and to have, 1 and 2 is 1, 2 and 3, etc., etc., etc. It has a thing called the rule of cinema, which I don't know if it's an actual rule, but if you're not sure how to work something out, it says to always go with the option that is more cinematic. And I agree with that, because the rule of cinema, or as I am used to referring to it in my home, is the rule of cool. And the rule of cool trumps almost all rules. Not all rules, but a lot of them. And then we go straight into getting ready to play. So when you have a character, you've got some stats, as in any game. You've got your movement, your combat, your awareness, your fright, your luck, and then you have some skills, items, wounds. Everybody has 10 wounds, which is nice. It's easy to keep up with. I think there may be some that have less that'll be noted on the thing, but the default number of wounds is 10 wounds. Luck is a commodity that you can use to re-roll dice or do a few different other things in different situations. Obviously, movement is how far you can move. Combat is what you need to roll to do something on a dice, which we'll talk about how combat works when we get to that section of the book. Fright is an important one. That's how many fear tokens that character can handle before they start to become terrified. Once they're over their cap, you get -2 for every one that's over their cap, and if you get to double their fright, they can just fall victim and be removed from play. So trying to keep the fright tokens under control is a pretty important part of the action economy of the game. in my experience playing so far. There are things in the game called supporting characters, which most of the plots, which is what they call the missions or scenarios in the book, will tell you when or if you get one. And then there's at least one character that I know of, Denise DeGraw, who comes in the starter box, who has a cell phone that she can use to call in a supporting character. And that ability is super powerful. We'll talk about that later when we get to the playthroughs. Once the supporting characters come down, they don't move ever. They have a full 360 degrees of line of sight, whereas your characters have a front facing and a back facing, and it's just the front 180 and the back 180 of the model. But it does facing does matter in the game, so that's an important thing to keep in mind. Fright tokens that are within range of the supporting characters will go away during the fright phase, which is the first phase of the game. They only have 3 wounds though, so they're pretty weak. So once they're at 3 wounds or more than 3 fright, they're pretty much toast. Once you get 4 characters, and you're supposed to choose them randomly. The starter box comes with, I think, 6, and you normally play with 4 characters. So you randomly draw your characters from the deck, grab your painted models or unpainted models if that's how you roll, and you're ready to get the game set up. The next step in that is to roll the plot or the mission. There are 6 of them, and they give you pretty detailed layouts of where to put things and what you need on the table and what you're trying to do. They're well-written scenarios. The game is played on a 3x3. I messed this up horribly the first time I played the game because I misread something in the first scenario and ended up playing on a 4x4 table. And I was like, what is happening here? This doesn't seem right. And then luckily, I reread everything. I was like, oh, I see what I did there. And it was wrong. But the table is always a 3x3, and it's always divided into the same 4 sections: A, B, C, and D. And that's used for placing of counters, placing of markers. The scenarios reference those quadrants pretty regularly to do different things. Once you've chosen your mission, you check the picture, and all the scenarios have a nice little handy-dandy diagram, like photograph diagram, which is awesome. I like it way more visually than just a top-down view of the map and where to put things. This is, again, that inspiration that we talked about, that inspiration for my immersion jollies. And it'll tell you where you need to put your fright tokens, your points of interest, any landscape, like your camp, your tents or roads or anything else like that. Get everything set up on the board, get your models placed in whatever it declares as their starting zone, and you are ready to get into the game, which is the very next step, or the next chunk, in the book. So once you've got everything set up, your character's out, and you're ready to start rolling dice, the first phase of the game of the turn order, is the fright phase. This is where you are checking for fright tokens, and if they're going to do stuff, and fright tokens are the things that can give you terror, one of the things that can give you terror. But the first part of the fright phase is to check to see if anybody is double their fright value and remove them from play if they are. And that is the only time that your character will fall victim to terror, is during that particular check. Then you roll for your fright tokens, and there's a little chart. Depending on what turn it is, it's harder to bring them in, and as the game goes on, it becomes more easy to roll to check for the fright tokens. And then eventually at turn 6, you just always check for them. If there's ever, at a certain point later in the phase, if there's not any fright tokens, then it tells you to add one into the middle of B and to the middle of C. Now when you roll for the fright tokens, you roll a D10, and there's a handy dandy little chart. And on a 1 to 3, you just flip all the lights within 6 inches. We'll talk about lights in a second. On a 4 to 8, you move the token 6 inches towards the closest character. And on a 9 or a 10, the killer pops out. If you roll a 9 and a 10 again, you roll a D10 for another fright token. Like if you roll a 9 or a 10 for a fright token and the killer has already been revealed, then you roll a dice to see if he will be stalking or enraged. You roll a D10, and if it's equal to or less than the number of wounds he has, he's going to be stalking, which means you put him base to base out of the front arc, I want to say, of the closest model or the target model, and then the enrage, but it can't attack that turn. And then the enraged side of it is they get, instead of critting on just a 1, they crit on a 1, 2, or 3. Then we come to the part of the scenario where we generate fright tokens in B and C if there are no fright tokens on the board. Then we come to the killer phase. Now, each scenario has a pre-built killer, like a themed killer that you can play against, but it also tells you how to just randomly generate a killer if you want to just different things, which is a great option for replayability, which I'm a big fan of replayability. I like being able to use the same models, keep playing the same game, the same system that I already know, and getting something different every time, and not just necessarily being locked into, well, this mission's only got this one option to play. You can play this mission with, whatever killer and just mix and match everything together. And I like that. So then we come to the killer phase. So the first step of the killer phase is to place the killer if one of three conditions are met. If A, it is the second turn after they have been driven off, which means your characters did enough damage to them to run them off the table. Or if they savored the moment the last turn, which means they killed somebody. They killed one of the characters, and then they retreated a little bit to savor the kill. And the third option is if no characters are in line of sight and the killer is not in base-to-base with the killer. Now, obviously, those only apply if the killer has already been revealed from a fright token and then removed from play. The next step in the phase is to move the killer. So the killer will have its target, and you roll a d10 and it moves that far towards that target. It can move through other characters. It just can't stop and share. It's got to have room. If it would stop and not have room, if it would be sitting on top of the other model, then you just move it enough forward to get it clear of the model. Any model that it passes through in that way takes an injury and takes a terror. Now that D10 also has some modifiers that go with it. So it gets an extra 2 inches if the target has tripped and not stood up yet. And it gets plus 1 inch for each point of terror on the target. So the killer gets faster over time. No matter how fast you run, that's why he's always right behind you, because he gets bonuses when you're scared and trip and hurt. At that point, you check for special actions for the killer, which will be in the killer's MO, traits, or the other thing that they have. Then we go to the attack, which is where you roll your d20 and you're looking for less than the combat value. Normally you crit on a 1. If you're enraged, you crit on a 1, 2, or 3. Some weapons can have a bleeding effect, and if that's the case, when that character activates, they lose 1 health from loss of blood until another character gives them the "let me take a look at it" action, which is one of the actions for the characters, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes. Next step is to flip the light token. So a light token is a 3-inch circle of light, and pretty much every other turn the lights flip on or off, and there are some other effects that can make them do it, so they can be, some lights flickering on and some lights flickering off. But again, horror movie, the lights are always flickering. Bad electrician, nothing ever works right. So that's, again, a fun mechanic that helps set the mood. But it also has some bonuses. So fright tokens that are in or move into the light go away. If a character starts their turn completely in the light, they don't get any terror that turn. And if the killer will not move into the light. He might move to the edge of it, but the killer will not move into the light. And if he's in the light, he will move out of the light. It doesn't displace him, but he will spend movement to get out of the light. So then we come to the character phase of the turn. This is where your guys get to do stuff. So there are 2 options here. You can perform 2 quick actions, or you can perform a quick action and a long action. If you do the quick action and the long action, you always do the quick action first. Their movement is on their card. Now, if you move, you can choose to move again. If you have any terror on you when you do that, however, you have to roll a d20. And you are looking to must roll equal to or less than the character's current terror points. They will trip at the end of their second movement. And that's something that, looking back now, I may have had that wrong and backwards when I played. I guess we'll see. Nope, I read through it again. I was doing it right. I just baffled myself up a little bit when I read that. And I like the tripping thing. I like that, if you run and you're trying to push further, then there's a chance that you could trip, fall down, because somebody always trips and falls down in the movies. If you trip, you have to use a quick action to stand up, if you have one left. And the killer, if you don't get up quickly, like the killer gets several bonuses against you for being on the ground. So it behooves you to stand up in an expeditious manner. Characters can move through other characters. They can't land on a character. If they would land on them, you have to back them up. They cannot, however, move through the killer. Now, after that second movement, if you're really trying to hoof it, you can make a desperate action. So that's if you've moved and not tripped. So that could be either any awareness-based action with a -10 modifier, or it can be a snapshot melee attack if you're in base-to-base with the killer. Exterior doors and windows to buildings are always considered locked. If you move into contact with one, you immediately stop your movement and then you try to break it, which is a strength check with a +4 modifier. Or no, a combat check with a +4 modifier. And if you are successful, then you jump, the model moves 1 inch directly on the other side of the door or window, whichever it was. Now, when you go through that door, or you jump through that window, or if your movement takes you within 2 inches of area terrain, you become subject to a jump scare. So that's, things that go bump in the night, or a sound, or whatever. So there's a chart, handy dandy, right there. And you roll a d10 and then consult it. Things that can happen are lunge, and the killer just jumps over out of the bushes at you, all the way up to your friend just ends up tapping you on the shoulder and scares the crap out of you. It's fun, and it brings the table and the terrain that you set up into the game more. It gives you that second player if you're playing solo, or that third player if you're playing co-op with a friend, because the table matters and the terrain matters, and it can cause things to happen that can completely force you to rethink your strategy for trying to complete the scenario successfully. And I dig it. I'm here for it in a big way. So that brings us to those luck points that I mentioned earlier, and those can be used to re-roll a dice that targets the character, like the killer's attack, re-roll a skill check made by the character, re-roll a search table roll made by the character, to remove 2 terror points, to heal 2 injuries, or when a character successfully searches for a weapon or supply, you can spend a luck point to generate 3 and choose one of them. And each character has 1 or 2 luck. 2 is the most I've seen in the starter box anyways. There may be some of the, in the expansions and stuff that have more. But it's a pretty finite and limited resource. But there's some pretty good things you can do with it. Which brings us to searching. And every once in a while, you can search around and you can find stuff. So when you do that, you roll a d10. On a 1 to 5, it's a weapon. On a 6 to 10, it's an item. If you're outside when you do it, you add +3 to that initial roll, because you're more likely to find stuff outside than you are a shotgun. You're more likely to find that inside than you are outside. But it could happen. Not saying it couldn't happen. It could. It could. This is set in America. It could happen. And then once you determine whether you have found a weapon or an item, you consult the relevant table in the back of the book. So we come to ammo and batteries. Some items will have ammunition like a gun. Some things will have batteries like Denise's cell phone. And every time you use it, you expend one of those charges. When it's out, you can't use it anymore. Pretty self-explanatory. We come to attacking then. So attacking works pretty much the same as it does with the killer attacking you. You've got your combat dice. You're looking for less than your combat value. The big difference, however, is that for every point of terror you have beyond your fright limit, you again get that -2 modifier, not to the dice roll, but to the target number, to your actual awareness. And it's modified by -2, so it would be to your dice roll. That's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. Anybody can punch or kick, even if you don't have a weapon. Ranged attacks are -2 for terror as well, -2 if they're in cover, and -5 if they're base to base with a friendly model. In my experience so far, killing the killer has not been a great choice. But I've been squaring off against one of the beefier visages, which are the overall general kind of killer type, whether they're weak, strong, kind of sets the overall difficulty level and what their attacks and things like that are. If you roll a 1, it's a crit. It's automatically hit and automatically an extra 2 damage. If you roll a 20, it's an automatic miss. And you drop your weapon and lose it, which is unfortunate because you need it to fend off the killer. If you do manage to drive the killer off, then you get a moment of respite. And that is that each character gets an additional quick action, and the killer cannot be placed that turn. Fright tokens are rolled for normally during this turn, treating any "it's here" results as a "what was that" result instead. So you get a little break. If you do manage to drive him off, you get a little break. And then you rinse and repeat through those phases until either you meet the scenario conditions, or everybody's dead, or you run out of turns. Whichever of those 3 things happens first. So then we come to the charts for weapons and items. I do like the artwork here. It has a very video game-ish feel to it. As far as like something that just the menu kind of, I don't know, it feels like a video game, piece of video game art to me, like a display, and I like it. I really, really, really enjoy it. Now we're to one of my favorite parts, because y'all know me. Look at these quick references. Look at this. Look at this. Look at how beautiful they are. Once you play through the phases and the turn a couple of times, these 3 pages right here will get you through playing the game. This is the only pages you really need. I'm looking to copy these and tape them to the wall with my other quick references for games that I play regularly. We've got our list of quick actions as well as our list of long actions. Our quick actions are to move, to let me take a look, which is to remove 2 injuries, kick it in, break open a door, distract the killer, stumble away, just disengage, stand up if you've fallen, encourage somebody to give them a +3 modifier to a next skill value of the next action they take. You can take a snapshot at the killer. You can concentrate to give yourself a bonus, encourage yourself. You can knock and shout to kick some lights on buildings, or you can catch, where you can give an item or a weapon that you found to a friendly character within 2 inches. Our long actions are to investigate, range combat, melee combat, try to fend the killer off, search the area, nothing to see, where you are rolling on the fright table for a fright token with the character weapons, and then add or subtract 1 from the D10 roll. Take a breath to remove a terror or 1 terror or 2 injury tokens, or 7 minutes in heaven, which is a teen only rule, which is a key word on the card. And then we've got all our charts for fright phase, what you got to do, the building tension, what those numbers are, special fright token rules, what to do with the fright tokens, what to do during the killer phase, what to do during the character phase, the jump scare table, and then how to do like making the skill rolls, desperate actions, the basic melee stuff, like just everything you need in these couple of quick references. I love it. And then on top of that, he gave us an index. God bless him. I feel like not enough people put indexes in book. We all know how I feel about quick references. I think that should be a core feature of every rule book that's ever made. But an index, I feel, is an underused addition, or for that back inside cover. An index can be so helpful. In a book this small, not a huge deal. But if you got a big, thick rule book, man, an index is a valuable thing to give to your players. So clocking in, I think I found mine on sale and I had a coupon. So I got my starter box for like 55, maybe $60. I think normally it's about 75 or so. But it's a good deal. It's everything you need to play. Tokens, widget, characters, killer. Now, the killer, they give you a tough choice there. So you can build a Jason-esque killer, a Mike Myers-esque killer, or they give you like a random like kind of canvas baghead killer. I honestly could not decide. So I put a poll on the Patreon and let them help me pick. And awesomely, they got in there and they helped out, and I appreciate you guys for that. So I ended up going with the Jason build. Now, one of the patrons, Jesse, he just said that his indecision was so bad about it that he just went and bought the other models. He just bought more copies of that killer sprue so that he could have all of them. And I came really, really close to just taking that piece of advice myself. And I still may. It's not too late. Now, obviously, even with the replayability of being able to just make up a killer, you're going to get tired of doing the same scenarios. So there are expansions. There's actually quite a few expansions that usually will come with sometimes a character, sometimes a killer, sometimes both. And then usually a scenario or two will be in there with them. And one of the cool things about the game is that all the packaging is in like old school VHS tape cases. And I just love it. It feels really good. So I'm excited to buy more of the expansions because I want to display them on a shelf, just like I would, VHS cassette tapes. So I really enjoy that. It's very clever marketing, and I appreciate it a lot. Now, those expansions range in price, I want to say, from like maybe $25 up to $40-ish bucks. Some maybe a little bit more. I'm not sure about availability. I don't know if they're all available or if some of them are on back order or whatever, because I just haven't looked yet. I haven't even gotten through, gotten my fun out of the starter yet, so I haven't bought anything extra for it yet. But I am interested to look into that and see. I know there's at least one. Like, I know that I want the Mama Luna's or Mama Nona's. I think it's Mama Luna's pizza expansion because the model is just ridiculously freaking cool. I saw one of the guys from Indie Invasion was doing an unboxing for it and talking about the models and stuff, and it's super sweet. If you're not familiar with Indie Invasion and you like these kind of small indie games, you should definitely go check them out and smash all the buttons because they talk about a lot of cool indie games. The only thing about this game that I'm not sure, and I'm not sure if this is by design of the game or by me doing something wrong, because it could very easily be me doing something wrong, and hopefully all of you wonderful people will help me with that once the bat reps start coming out in the next week or two. But I'm not getting, and I think it also is one of the characters that I was using, because she's just really, really, really good. Her ability is super strong, but I wasn't getting the same kind of feeling of suspense, that kind of knot in my gut that I get when I play like Perilous Tales. But again, I'm not sure. I think that has a lot to do with that character that I drew. I think I'm going to try not using her in the next game I play and see if that helps, because I did draw her in all of the games that I've played so far. When I've randomly picked, I've just always ended up with her in the group, which you're picking 4 out of 6, so that's not unheard of for that to happen. So I'm hoping that changes, or that it actually, something, I don't know. I want it to be, I want more of that suspense, that knot in my gut feeling, and I think not playing with her is probably going to help to give me that. Now, that being said, the game is still very, very, very enjoyable. It's got a very interesting strategy. It's got a fun and simple action economy. And it forces some pretty tough choices sometimes, whether it's more important, take the terror off or just get closer to the objective. I've enjoyed it a lot so far, and I look forward to enjoying it more. So, in my opinion, if you like horror games, if you have modern terrain, or if you just have a lot of woodland terrain and maybe 1 or 2, cabin type houses, it's a solid game to pick up. I've enjoyed it so far, and I'm going to continue to enjoy it. And you know what else I've enjoyed? I've enjoyed sitting here and y'all letting me talk at you for a little bit. Thanks for stopping by as I talked about Don't Look Back by Matt Burns from Blackslight Studios. I hope you have an absolutely amazing rest of your day. And as always, I'd like to say a big, huge, from the bottom of my heart, thank you to our patrons who support us and pledge to us over on Patreon. You guys are the absolute best. If you enjoyed the content you saw here today and that's something that you would like to consider doing to help out the channel, go over there, check out the link in the description, check out the Patreon. There's a lot of cool stuff over there, including access to our Discord server, talk to me, hang out with me, talk about our work, what we got going on in the hobby, some shout outs, all kinds of cool stuff. Check it out if that's something that you think you would be into. And regardless of whether or not you do that, I want you to know that I am incredibly grateful that you decided to stop by and spend part of your day with me today, rolling dice and pushing toy soldiers around. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. And as always, may the dice be ever in your favor. There are Nart. Huh? Exterior doors and wielding. Who?